The air in the grand ballroom of the Davidson Royal Crest Resort was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, aged whiskey, and the unspoken language of old money. It was our family's annual holiday gathering, less a celebration of the season and more a meticulously staged performance of success. I stood by a large, ostentatious ice sculpture that depicted a rearing horse, the Davidson family crest, feeling entirely out of place despite technically belonging. My dress was simple, well-made but quiet, a stark contrast to the glittering, sequined, and jewel-encrusted gowns and sharp, tailored suits that filled the room. Uncle Mason, the patriarch in all but name since my grandfather passed, held court near the champagne fountain, his laugh booming a little too loudly over the ambient jazz. My cousins, Lucas and Chloe, circulated with practiced ease, their smiles fixed, their conversations centered on recent extravagant purchases and exotic vacations. Lucas was detailing his latest investment trip to Aspen, which sounded suspiciously like a ski holiday involving significant après-ski expenses. Chloe, not to be outdone, was showing off photos on her phone of a client networking cruise through the Mediterranean, featuring more shots of her in various designer outfits than actual clients. "Oh, Riley, there you are." Chloe's voice cut through the chatter, saccharine sweet as she air-kissed my cheek, leaving a faint trace of her overpowering fragrance. "We were just talking about you. How is the motel?" She said motel like it was a contagious disease. My stomach tightened, a familiar clench of annoyance and something akin to old hurt. "Old Creekwood is doing well, thank you, Chloe," I replied evenly, taking a slow sip of my sparkling water. It wasn't champagne. I rarely indulged in their world, even for appearances. Lucas joined us, smirking. "Still managing that little place? Alder Street, isn't it? Honestly, Riley, you're what, 38 now? Don't you think it's time to, move on to something real? Like actual resorts?" He gestured around the opulent ballroom with a sweeping hand. "This is where the real money is. The Davidson legacy." Anna, my mother, drifted over, looking uncomfortable. "Now, Lucas, Riley enjoys her work." But even her defense was weak, accompanied by a sigh that suggested she wished I enjoyed something more. Davidson appropriate. Robert, my father, stood nearby, absorbed in a conversation about the stock market, not even glancing in my direction. His disinterest stung, a familiar ache I'd learned to live with. "It's just," Chloe continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "we worry about you, sweetie. It must be challenging. Dealing with, well, motel people. Not exactly our usual clientele." She giggled, a light, empty sound. My smile didn't reach my eyes. "They're good people, Chloe. Hardworking. They deserve comfortable, well-maintained places to live, just like anyone else." Lucas scoffed. "Please. It's about return on investment, Riley, not some quaint social experiment. That old Creekwood property barely breaks even. Uncle Mason keeps talking about unloading it. Probably get more selling it for land value than keeping it running." This hit a nerve, a deep one. Old Creekwood wasn't just a property. It was where my grandfather started, a place with history and a community that had lived there for decades. A community I had come to know and care about deeply. I had poured my own resources, my time, my heart into renovating it, improving life for its residents, making it a truly thriving, albeit small, part of my own portfolio. They saw a struggling motel. I saw a restored piece of history, a testament to community, a place built on values they wouldn't understand. And Lucas's casual mention of unloading it, selling off a piece of history and displacing people for a quick buck, ignited a cold anger inside me. They had no idea. They were so blinded by the glitter of their resorts, they couldn't see the rot setting in beneath the surface. The conversation thankfully shifted back to their world, the new private jet Lucas was considering for business travel, the upcoming charity gala Chloe was chairing, funded largely by the Davidson Foundation, which Lucas skimmed from, the latest market trends that Uncle Mason was dominating. I excused myself politely, needing space to breathe, needing to escape the suffocating bubble of their entitlement. I walked towards a quiet corner, my mind racing, the sting of their words fueling a fire that had been building for years. They thought I was the failure, scratching by with motel people. They had no idea the empire I had built in the shadows, an empire founded on the very principles they scoffed at. And soon, very soon, their gilded cage was about to shake. Later that evening, the mood shifted subtly. The conversation, while still centered on wealth, took a more anxious turn. Uncle Mason joined Lucas and Chloe, his usual booming voice lowered, a furrow in his brow. They were talking about the business, about Davidson Resorts itself. "This new shareholder is becoming a real problem," Uncle Mason muttered, swirling his brandy. "Demanding access to financials, questioning everything. Started sniffing around the marketing budgets, Chloe, and your development expenditures, Lucas." Chloe paled slightly under her heavy makeup. "They can't do that. That's private." "Apparently, they can when they hold a significant block of shares," Uncle Mason snapped, looking stressed. "They've formally requested a forensic audit. A full, no-holds-barred audit." Lucas slammed his glass down, making a few heads turn. "An audit? Are they insane? That'll take forever. And what about my Aspen project? The contracts are almost finalized." "Exactly," Chloe chimed in, her voice shrill. "And the budget for the Met Gala after-party I'm planning. That's crucial for brand visibility." I listened from a few feet away, pretending to be fascinated by a mediocre landscape painting. My heart pounded a steady rhythmic beat against my ribs. This was it. The audit. I was the shareholder they feared. Through Willow Creek Hospitality, the company I had built from the ground up over 15 years, quietly acquiring and revitalizing historic properties, I had strategically and silently bought up a substantial stake in Davidson Resorts. It hadn't been easy or cheap. It required leveraging every asset, every connection, every bit of profit from Willow Creek's success, and operating through layers of shell corporations and investment funds managed by Isabel, my brilliant COO and the only person who knew my full plan. I hadn't done it for revenge. Not entirely. It started with the frustration, the deep-seated pain of being constantly underestimated and dismissed. But it grew into something more. I saw what they were doing to the Davidson legacy, the one my grandfather had built with integrity, focusing on quality and service, not just profit margins. I saw the properties falling into disrepair because funds were being siphoned off. I heard from people like David. David was an anomaly in the Davidson corporate office, a man who had worked there for 30 years, starting under my grandfather. He had quietly reached out to me months ago, seeing the rot from the inside, disgusted by the blatant misuse of company funds for personal gain. He sent me encrypted emails, copies of invoices, expense reports, irrefutable proof of Lucas's fraudulent development budgets, Chloe's personal luxury trips billed as marketing, Uncle Mason's inflated consulting fees paid to shell companies. He was risking his career, maybe more, because he believed in what the company used to be. His courage fueled my determination. The audit would confirm everything David had shown me. "They're trying to find out who this shareholder is," Uncle Mason said, looking around the room as if the person might be hiding behind a potted palm. "Hired some aggressive private investigators. They're digging into everything." A shiver, not of fear but of controlled tension, ran down my spine. They were looking, but they were looking in the wrong places. They were looking for a corporate raider, a foreign entity, someone in their own high-flying circle. They would never think to look at the motel manager they regularly mocked. The irony was almost comical. They were asking everyone for information, using their network. Little did they know, my network, built on trust and real work, was far more effective. "Maybe," Chloe said, her eyes darting towards me, a calculating look replacing her panic for a moment. "Maybe Riley could help?" Uncle Mason and Lucas looked at her, then at me, skepticism clear on their faces. "Riley? How could she help?" Lucas scoffed. "Well," Chloe said, her tone shifting to that falsely sweet, patronizing one again. "She works in hospitality, right? On the ground level. Maybe she knows people. People who deal with less visible transactions. Independent owners. Someone who might have heard whispers." Uncle Mason considered this, a desperate glint in his eye. It was clear they were grasping at straws. "Could be," he conceded reluctantly. "You know anyone, Riley? Anyone who deals in quiet acquisitions? Private investment groups? Anyone who might know who this person is?" This was the hook. They were offering me the rope to hang them with. My heart hammered, but my exterior remained calm. I met Uncle Mason's gaze, then Lucas's, then Chloe's. Their faces were a mixture of arrogance, desperation, and complete obliviousness. The world of independent hospitality is quite extensive, Uncle Mason, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. And yes, I do know people who understand complex financial structures. People who operate quietly. It's not always about the flashy resorts. A flicker of hope crossed their faces, quickly followed by their usual dismissiveness. They wouldn't believe I was the person, but maybe I knew someone who knew someone. They saw me as a tool, a connection to a world beneath their notice that might, for once, be useful to them. It was insulting, but it fit my plan perfectly. "All right, Riley," Uncle Mason said, his tone slightly more conciliatory than before. "See what you can find out. It's important. For the family." For the family, I echoed, a silent promise hardening in my heart. Yes, it was for the family. The real family legacy they had forgotten. I left the party shortly after, the oppressive air replaced by the cool night breeze. My mind was no longer reeling. It was sharply focused. I pulled out my phone, sending a brief coded message to Isabel. Phase 3 initiated. They're fighting. Prepare for tomorrow. Driving back to my modest, comfortable apartment near Old Creekwood, the apartment they thought I rented, the apartment I owned along with most of the block, I felt a mix of emotions. There was the lingering sting of their contempt, the heavy weight of the coming confrontation, but also a quiet sense of purpose. They had called me small, irrelevant, poor. They had no idea the strength it took to build in silence, the clarity that came from living outside their gilded cage, the power of building something real, brick by brick, relationship by relationship. The audit was complete. David had provided the final pieces of evidence. Isabel had the legal filings ready. Tomorrow, the quiet person they dismissed would walk into their boardroom, not as a supplicant or an embarrassment, but as the owner. The next morning, I stood in my office. It wasn't a penthouse, but it was a spacious, well-appointed floor overlooking the trees and historic buildings of the city. It was the headquarters of Willow Creek Hospitality. Isabel walked in, setting my usual strong coffee on my desk. "Everything is in place, Riley," she said, her expression serious. Isabel had been with me almost from the beginning of Willow Creek. She was brilliant with finance and logistics, but more than that, she understood my vision and the quiet drive behind it. She knew the sacrifices I'd made, the years of relentless work, the deliberate choice to stay out of the spotlight. The audit packets are distributed to the independent board members. The legal team is on standby. The press release is ready to go live 20 minutes after the meeting starts. She paused, looking at me intently. "Are you sure about this, Riley? Once the reveal happens, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family, it will change forever." I walked to the window, looking out at the city that felt more like home than any resort the Davidsons owned. "They need to learn, Isabel," I said quietly. "They've treated my grandfather's legacy, a legacy built on community and hard work, like a personal piggy bank. They've hurt people, neglected properties, all for their own vanity. They need to face consequences. And the Davidson name needs to mean something real again." I turned back from the window. I wasn't wearing the simple dress from last night. Today, I wore a tailored, dark suit. Not flashy, but sharp, conveying competence and quiet strength. It was the kind of suit Aunt Evelyn, Uncle Mason's wife, another pillar of the family's social facade, thankfully not at the party last night but a key part of their world, used to say I should wear if I ever wanted to land a suitable husband. Instead, I was wearing it to take down the house of cards they had built. "The press release timing is set?" I confirmed. "Hard copy delivered to key news desks, digital queued for release," Isabel confirmed. "Once it hits, there will be no hiding." "Then let's begin," I said, picking up my briefcase, which contained not just my notes, but the future of Davidson Resorts and the reckoning for my family. The Davidson Resorts boardroom fell silent as I entered. The family members were already there, clustered at one end of the long table. Uncle Mason, Lucas, and Chloe looked tense, their faces etched with worry. Robert and Anna were also present, looking bewildered by my presence. A few independent board members sat scattered around, looking uncomfortable. The air was thick with unspoken tension and anxiety. "Riley?" What are you doing here? Uncle Mason demanded, his voice sharp with annoyance and underlying fear. This is a private board meeting. You're not. You weren't invited. Lucas snorted, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, did you get lost on the way to the catering staff entrance? I ignored them, walking directly to the head of the table, to the seat designated for the majority shareholder. I placed my briefcase down with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the hushed room. Actually, Uncle Mason, I said, my voice clear and steady, projecting calm I didn't entirely feel but had spent years cultivating. I convened this meeting. Their eyes widened in confusion. Robert finally looked at me, a question in his eyes. My name is Riley Davidson, I stated, looking directly at Uncle Mason. I am the founder and owner of Willow Creek Hospitality. And as of 6 months ago, I am the principal shareholder of Davidson Resorts. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Chloe's sharp intake of breath and Uncle Mason's choked gasp. Lucas's smirk vanished, replaced by utter disbelief. Anna brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Robert's hands clenched on the table. Riley. Robert breathed, his voice barely a whisper. I met his gaze and nodded. Good morning, Dad. Good morning, everyone. I opened my briefcase and began sliding stacks of paper, the audit reports, the legal documents, across the polished surface of the table towards the independent board members and my stunned family. Let's discuss the state of the company and your recent expenditures. This is insane. Lucas stammered, half rising from his seat. You? The motel manager. Just what, Lucas? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. The black sheep? The person you dismissed? The woman who works with motel people? Chloe blinked rapidly, shaking her head as if to clear it. But you manage. Old Creekwood. I own Old Creekwood, I corrected. And I manage it because I believe in building something real, with integrity and purpose. Something you wouldn't understand. The independent board members began flipping through the documents, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock and then to grim understanding. These folders, I continued, gesturing to the reports, contain detailed documentation of how company funds have been systematically misused for personal gain. Inflated invoices, fraudulent expense reports, sweetheart deals with shell corporations. The forensic audit is quite thorough. I turned my gaze to Lucas, who was now flushed beet red, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. Lucas, would you care to explain the multi-million-dollar budget for your Aspen site scouting, which seems to have primarily funded luxury chalets and private ski instructors? He stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Or Chloe, I turned to her, her face pale and rigid with horror. Perhaps you can walk us through how your Mediterranean marketing cruise justified billing the company for designer gowns and private yacht charters? How could you? Uncle Mason finally found his voice, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. How could you do this? To your own family. You did this to yourselves, Uncle Mason. I replied calmly, my voice echoing slightly in the silent room. You treated a legacy built on hard work and integrity like your personal ATM. While you were busy flaunting your ill-gotten gains and mocking my humble life, I was building something genuine. Something based on values, not vanity. But why pretend? Chloe whispered, tears welling in her eyes, though I suspected they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. Why hide? I didn't pretend anything, I stated. I lived according to my values. I invested wisely. You were the ones pretending. Pretending your superficial success had substance. You assumed wealth had to be loud. My success was quiet because it was built on solid ground, not empty air. Suddenly, phones on the table began to buzz relentlessly. One of the independent board members picked up his phone, his eyes widening as he read the screen. Breaking news. Willow Creek Hospitality CEO, identified as Riley Davidson, confirms controlling stake in Davidson Resorts. Audit findings cited. Reports of extensive financial irregularities. Uncle Mason looked as if he might have a stroke. Lucas buried his face in his hands. Chloe let out a small, broken sob. Anna looked back and forth between me and the phone, her face a mask of disbelief. This will ruin us, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. This, I said firmly, will save you. from yourselves. Effective immediately, Davidson Resorts will undergo comprehensive operational reform. No more hidden budgets. No more nepotistic contracts. No more treating this company like a family credit card. And if we don't comply? Uncle Mason stammered, trying to muster some semblance of authority. I allowed myself a small, hard smile. Then I'll pass these reports to the relevant authorities. I'm sure the IRS and the SEC would find them illuminating. Silence descended again, heavy and absolute. They were trapped. What do you want, Riley? Robert finally asked, his voice low, tinged with regret. I want you to remember what the Davidson name was supposed to mean, I said, meeting his gaze. Grandfather built resorts that were landmarks of quality, places that treated employees and guests with respect, not monuments to greed. I stood, gathering my papers. You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy, or face the consequences of letting it rot. I paused. I hear there are some lovely condos in Boca Raton. Might be more your speed now. I turned to leave. Riley, wait. Robert's voice stopped me at the door. He looked older, defeated. I was wrong about you. Yes, Dad, I replied quietly, looking back at him. You were. The aftermath was swift and dramatic, playing out like a corporate thriller in the local news. Riley Davidson, the quiet motel manager, unmasked as the force behind the takeover of the prestigious Davidson Resorts, exposing her family's corruption in a stunning boardroom reveal. The media loved the narrative of the underestimated black sheep bringing down the arrogant elite. Uncle Mason resigned immediately, facing potential legal action. Lucas and Chloe were forced out of their positions and became pariahs in their social circles. Lucas's development projects collapsed under scrutiny, leaving him buried in debt and lawsuits. Chloe's marketing events were revealed as blatant misuse of funds, and her reputation was destroyed. Their friends vanished. Their access to luxury evaporated. It was a harsh fall, but not all of it was purely punitive. Facing the collapse of his world and the shame of the audit, Robert began asking Riley questions. Not as a father trying to regain control, but as someone genuinely wanting to understand the business Riley had built, the values she held. He started visiting the Willow Creek hospitality office, observing, listening. Anna, my mother, was perhaps the most changed. The polished facade crumbled, replaced by a quiet, introspective demeanor. She started volunteering at a local shelter Willow Creek Hospitality supported, working with people who had lost everything. She told me later it gave her a sense of purpose she'd never found in social events or shopping. 6 months later, I was sitting at a table in the sunny courtyard of the old Creekwood Motel, reviewing quarterly reports for Davidson Resorts. The numbers were looking good, profitability was improving, but more importantly, employee morale was up, and guest satisfaction scores were rising under the new management I had put in place. Old Creekwood itself was flourishing, a jewel in the Willow Creek portfolio, its charm and history preserved. A soft knock sounded on the open door of my small ground-floor apartment unit that overlooked the courtyard. I still kept it, lived in it part-time. It grounded me. I opened the door to find my mother, Anna. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back, no makeup. For a moment, I barely recognized her casualness. Riley, she said softly, holding up a small card. I got your invitation. The Old Creekwood holiday party. I smiled. It's not quite your usual scene, Mom. She glanced around my apartment, then out at the bustling courtyard where staff and residents were starting to put up festive decorations. No, she admitted. It isn't. But I'm learning that maybe scene isn't everything. Her eyes landed on a framed photo on a shelf, me at 23, beaming, holding my first modest real estate license. I never asked, she said, her voice quiet. Why this path? Why motels? Why all this? She gestured vaguely, encompassing the motel, my company, the whole dramatic turn of events. Because I wanted to build something real, Mom, I replied honestly. Not just buy it and flaunt it. I wanted to create value, not just extract it. I wanted to prove that you could do business ethically, put people first, and still succeed. She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. And now, she murmured, you control more than all of us combined. I do, I nodded. But control wasn't the goal. Purpose was. She took a deep breath. Will you teach me, Riley? Show me how. Come tonight, I said, my voice gentle. Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen to Maria talk about her job. See what Mrs. Rodriguez means to this community. That's where legacy begins, Mom. Not in boardrooms, but in the lives you touch. Later, as the sun set, I stood by my window watching the string lights twinkle to life in the old Creekwood courtyard. In the distance, I could see the familiar, imposing silhouette of the Davidson Royal Crest Resort against the city skyline, no longer a symbol of my family's greed, but of restoration and changed leadership. Below me, old Creekwood buzzed with quiet, genuine life. The brickwork was solid, the original wooden beams were restored, the garden courtyards were tended with care. My phone chimed with new messages, acquisition offers, speaking invitations, partnership proposals for Willow Creek hospitality. We were in high demand now. But I kept my schedule manageable, my routine grounded. Success, for me, wasn't about proving them wrong by becoming bigger and louder than them. It was about quietly building something that mattered, something that would last. Sometimes, the person they pity becomes the one they must learn from. And sometimes, the best kind of triumph doesn't roar, it endures. At the old Creekwood holiday party that evening, I stood near the fountain, watching my family tentatively navigate a world they had once completely dismissed. Mom sat beside Mrs. Rodriguez, listening with genuine interest to stories of life in the neighborhood over the past 40 years. Robert was talking to Maria, asking about her family, showing a simple kindness I hadn't often seen. Lucas was awkwardly helping Mr. Keller, a World War II veteran and one of our longest-term residents, string lights, his usual swagger replaced by a hesitant politeness. Even Chloe was helping a group of kids decorate cookies, a small, unforced smile on her face. Slowly, perhaps painfully, they were learning. Real wealth wasn't in what you could flaunt, but in what you could preserve, what you could share, what you could elevate. Robert walked over to me near the cocoa table. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, your grandfather, he used to say that buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets. I nodded. I found his old ledgers. Handwritten notes about protecting tenants, about the staff being family. We forgot that, he admitted, looking at me not like the daughter who went off track, but like someone who had picked up a torch he had dropped. You could have ruined us, Riley. That was never the point, I said, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. Something rooted in value, not valuation. And sometimes, the greatest success isn't in proving them wrong by beating them at their own game. It's in offering them a better version of right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, then maybe you see a little of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something real, something that couldn't be taken away because it was rooted in values, not vanity. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. Subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.